think we're getting to that stage where there's quite a few wineries that they only make natural wines, which I think is quite nice, is just to be fully committed to it. It's where I'd like to change the winery to.
Okay. And it's interesting you say that, because in the conversation that Jamie Drummond had with Stephen Wong a while back, he was saying that there was sort of a real peak of experimentation with orange wines, maybe around 2014 to 16, and he's seen a slight waning since then. So you see, you're mentioning a lot of people sort of dipping their toe, and then those who really decide to get behind it are consolidating and moving forward. So do you think that from this little dip, we're going to see growth again?
Yeah, I think because during that peak that Stephen was talking about, that would have been a lot of, especially in Gisborne here, a lot of the large industrial wineries would have made an orange wine. But of course, it's, it comes down to the quality of product. People who are growing their own vines, or at least working with the grower firsthand and really trying to maximize the quality of it. That's kind of what determines how nice it can be, obviously.
Yeah,
so a lot of those large producers were making an orange wine purely for making an orange wine. They'd heard of people making it. They had a go at it, and they're like, no, this is disgusting. We don't like it. Meanwhile, there's a lot of the smaller people now who are still carrying on, realizing that, it's a pretty full-on way of making it.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the industrial guys thought that it was a lot less maintenance, that you just put it in a vessel and leave it, but it takes a lot more care than normal wine, because, it's avoiding intervention.
So when you're talking about a lot more care, and I absolutely understand you in terms of the rigor that is required, the cellar hygiene, everything required to really make beautiful, high quality orange wine, natural wine, anything where you're sort of going off the beaten track. But when specifically for you, when you're saying more care, is it a question of really going in and tasting from barrel more often and checking, doing more analysis on the wines? What does that mean for you in your cellar?
Basically just hygiene. So for the fermentation process, that's fairly normal for us. We have a few red varieties and we just treat it the same as a red. But it's just making sure that, the things we use are all clean, and also we'll taste it every day. And, if there's something like a bit of volatile acid that's coming through or anything like that, we can smell it a couple of days before it can really get a foothold. So we can either press it off or just give it a bit of oxygen.
Yeah.
And so it's just monitoring, really. Monitoring and hygiene. That's the thing, because there's people can make orange wine and intervene, but I think I like the natural approach of just monitoring and just not intervening in a chemical sense, but just being able to look after it. If it's getting a little bit funny, it's time to press it off, put it in a barrel. And again, that's what I was saying before about the barrels. Put something that's a little bit funny in a barrel and give it some micro.
Give it some time. Yeah.
And it just comes right every time.
So somebody who wants to try your orange wines, it's the Libbiamo range?
Yeah.
All right. And so you've got, from what I can see from your website, you've got an amphora, a Chenin Blanc, a Chardonnay, a Gewürztraminer, a Muscat, and a field blend. You mentioned as well that you were starting to experiment with Georgian grapes. And so are we going to see a new wine in this range?
I think you'll probably see less in that range.
Okay.
So just spending more focus on it, because we don't have the Gewürztraminer vines anymore.
Okay.
And I think just so that the whole brand doesn't get so big and you're like, I don't know where to start, just to try and have a bit more focus on it.
Right.
And for the Mitzvani, the Georgian variety, I'll see where that goes. It's mostly just, I didn't actually pick that variety for orange wine either. Okay. I went through just pure logic chain to select that variety. It's the soils that it likes and the climate that it likes actually just was exactly like Gisborne.
Oh, okay.
And so it's more that variety I've got is more a pruning experiment, because here in Gisborne we have quite a strong influence from the ocean. We get quite a bit of humidity too, and so I'm actually growing them goblet style, which there isn't much of it in New Zealand, and I'm mostly planting that just for airflow around the plants in any direction, and also lowering a fruit per vine just to get more concentration. And then the variety that I picked was just off the information that I got from the variety pretty much. And then of course, as I started playing with it, I learned that it's a really beautiful wine to make a orange wine with. What
kind of flavors does it have?
It's quite. I'm not very good at listing off a palette on it, but it's really different than any other white variety that I've played with, because the skins are so thick.
Okay.
And you get this kind of almost a little bit of fennel or aniseed in it, and so much more tannin than out of any other white varieties, which is quite funny. It does to me feel like a red wine, same body, and it's got the same tannin, just with a bit more floral character in it.
You got this sort of elegance and lightness, aromatically speaking, of a white wine with the body and structure of a red.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
And so a lot of the time I was doing, first couple of years, I was making skin contact with Riesling.
Okay.
And this is where I kind of learned this. The first year I did the Mitzvania, I learned, for me, Riesling isn't what I want to do on skins. It would just create this kind of proteiny smell. Like it kind of smelled like raw sausages, which is quite weird.
I can see how you wouldn't want to go further with that.
Yeah. And I think as well for something like Riesling, which is a really delicate variety,
right,
leave it on skins for 100 days or so, and it would just pull out a lot of that acid, and without that rich acid, it just kind of made it a bit too soft.
Right.
With light phenolics, it didn't have as much structure.
Yeah, so you were losing sort of the best characteristics of Riesling and pulling out elements that weren't desirable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, by the time I got to the bottle, I still enjoyed it, but it wasn't until that I played around with Mitzvani that I learned that it's a much more enjoyable variety to work with, at least on skins.
Well, that's the one thing that I find so interesting about orange wines is I often talking to people and they say, just so unfamiliar with tannins on a white wine that they immediately think they don't enjoy them. And I find a lot of them are being drunk too young. Many you need to really forget about, like a tannic red wine. Forget about for a few years or decant for a good couple of hours before you serve it and really allow it that evolution.
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing with nearly all of the Lebbiano wines. So I'd say the Chenin Blanc that we've got, that one I quite happily open up and drink right away because it's got that freshness. But things like the field blend that we have, I try and make sure that everyone that gets it, like either leave it in your cellar or leave it in the cupboard or something for a couple of years. Otherwise, just pretend like it's a big grunty red wine.
Yeah,
it's just got so much phenolic and so much tannin. A lot of people think that it's on that same par as having the vibrant and juicy, quick drinking wines, like the natural wines kind of promote themselves as.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's definitely like a long-term kind of wine, a proper cellaring wine.
Have you, how long do you think they could go? Sort of what do you think is aging window for some of these wines you were mentioning, especially the field blend, which is Viognier, Marsanne and Muscat, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'd say that they could, especially if we're talking about the field blend, I'd say it can go for quite a long time, over a decade, just because it's got so much tannin in it. My parents went over to Japan for a trade show that they were at, and there was a customer there who really enjoyed the Ljubljana wines, and she'd had a bottle of, I can't remember if it was the Gewürztraminer or the field blend, but I believe it was the field blend, had a bottle in her fridge for 6 months. It was open, and she would take open the cork and have a little sip, put the cork back in and put it back in the fridge. And she brought it with her to the trade tasting, and my mum said it was still beautiful after being open for 6 months.
That's amazing.
So I think, if anything, I'd say I wouldn't drink it for the next 5 years. I'd leave it down, and then in 10 years I'd drink it. So
it's a tribute as well to your, you were talking about earlier about, the slightly more oxidative handling, to really give them that stability and that ability to remain so fresh even when they're open. And
yeah, I think for me, the oxygen is the next thing that I want to play with. Is finding where my limits of reduction and oxidization are.
With the perfect balance. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of interesting things that I can go there with making a stable wine without needing to rely on chemical protectants, adding in sulfur or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think making the wine far more stable to the environment will help out.
Absolutely.
Without losing too much fruit, but I'm not massive on those big fruit flavors. I like the richness and the subtleties in it rather than a big fruit bomb in your face.
Yeah, wines that are more about texture than about fruit.
Yeah, because I going back to the bar, most of the wines that I get are about 60% of the wines I get are Italian. So
okay.
And that's where I enjoy most of the wines too.
What are some of your favorites that you have at the bar?
Or Foradori is always going to be one of the top, but plenty of others too, especially really unassuming. Tremonti is making beautiful wines. San Lorenzo. There's plenty of others, especially throughout Tuscany, and making really beautiful biodynamic wines. And not exactly playing too much into the orange wines. I think, assuming that I'm kind of following the same path a bit of just working with the variety and making the style out of the varieties I've got, seeing what variety I've got, and then coming out with the product at the end, which is driven from what the traits of the variety are and how it likes to be fermented.
Mm-hmm. And you play a lot of, you got a lot of vinyl going in the bar as well. What would be the ideal soundtrack for serving some of your Italian wines? What do you have playing at the moment?
One that I always go back to, Tourist by Saint Germain.
Oh yeah.
One of the best. I did just get a bunch, a new stack that I brought back from Australia with me. I don't know, I suppose it changes a lot with the day. Saturday might be some jazz or something just because it's the end of the week for the bar and taking it down. Friday's usually a bit more funk and soul. Mm-hmm. It changes on my mood.
Nice. Well, we're all going to have to go and visit Sam at his wine bar, taste his orange wines, taste his Italian wine selection as well. Thank you so much for joining me for today for this conversation for Good Food Revolution. It's been an absolute treat talking to you, and I can't wait to come to Gisborne and taste your wines with you one day.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Thank you, Jacky.
You're welcome.